Tēnā koutou, New Zealand, and welcome to the BYC Podcast, coming to you live from Auckland and Wellington and live from the Export Beer Garden studio. It's Paul Ford speaking, and I'm joined by the one and only, the wonderful, slightly deaf, slightly blind Dylan Cleaver. How are you, mate?
I'm very good, thank you, Paul. Lovely to hear your dulcet tones.
Yeah, I've been really busy up at Waiheke Island, so sorry I've been away. It's been pretty frantic. Hey, we should get into things, DC. There is actually some cricket on. This is the tour that nobody seems to care about. It starts at 4 o'clock in the morning. There's interim coaching setups, I think, on both sides, including Grant Bradburn for Pakistan. And a guy called, I've checked this out, a guy called Boom Pathak, who's the batting coach for Pakistan. He's played one-day international versus New Zealand. He got bowled for 0 by Shane Bond, but he scored 11,000 first-class runs and scored 40 domestic tons. So I've really focused in on the coaching staff, DC. What's caught your eye, mate?
Well, I'm not even sure if I could rattle off the New Zealand coaching staff other than I know that Gary Stead's not there, and I assume Shane Jurgensen's taking the team. Is that right?
I think the Wonky Donkey's definitely in there as well. I saw him get zoomed in on as things started to get a bit sweaty in the end of that third game the other night. So, I didn't check. I just knew it was interim, and I just ran with that, and then I went down the Boom Pathak rabbit hole.
Yeah, so we're 2-1 down. Pakistan won the first two relatively easily. Pretty poor chases from New Zealand. And look, I was surprised actually that they stole a game. So they're right in the series at 2-1. I didn't really see that third result coming. And the reason I haven't really seen it coming is I just don't know where we're going to get that fuel-injected start from that you really need in T20 cricket. And I've just made a note here that the top three combined have scored a total of 165 runs, the bulk of them coming with Tommy Latham, who got a very good 60 actually in the third match. But they've done it in 165 balls, so they've actually taken up a whole T20's worth of balls and then some for 165 runs. And that's just not going to win you many games. And the middle order is actually scoring at a really good clip. Your hitters, Mitchell, Chapman and Neesham, they're going at kind of around about, if you average it all together, a strike rate of about 150, but they're just having to do too much too quickly. So I guess that's the thing that's kind of caught my eye in terms of the negative aspects of this New Zealand team.
Yeah, well, I mean, as you say, expectations pretty low, bearing it in the middle of the night, not even sending the gun coaches. Pakistan, their new coach starts in a couple of weeks. I'll stop talking about the coaching now. And then, of course, a very second-string New Zealand team, with no, obviously, Bolt, Southey, Conway, Williamson, Bracewell, Allen, Phillips, Ferguson, Santner, and even Seifert, who we might have thought, well, he'd be quite handy over there to blaze away at the top or put some power in that middle order. Of course, he's on dad duty, despite being in red-hot form, the worst time paternity leave of all time. But on those guys you were talking about, Latham, Young, and Bowes, it's interesting, isn't it? I had a really quick look just at the strike rates. Tom Latham's international strike rate in T20s is 108.
Small sample size.
Absolutely. And Will Young, 99, which is, not that great. And then Chad Bowes, 114. So, I think your point is right. If we were really, really obsessed with kind of getting off to these blazing starts, I mean, it's going to be, I had a quick look, top of all time for New Zealand, Finn Allen. He's at the IPL. Yeah. Jimmy Neesham's right up there, so we could actually just throw him up the order. Colin Munro out of favour. Phillips is at the IPL. And then probably unlikely, but the fifth ranked was Jacob Oram with a strike rate of 140, possibly unavailable. Guppy, 136. And, I guess the other opportunity here, the guy that we have been banging on about, we're late to the party, Josh Clarkson, maybe a guy that could have been thrown in the mix.
I do look at it and think this. Look, I know there's complications that come when you hand your central contract back, and you're really putting yourself at the mercy of the selectors in a way that you wouldn't be if you were still part of that mix. But I look at Chad Bowes, he's 30 years old. He's not a young whippersnapper that they picked up and they're going to develop over the next couple of years in the hope that he'll be hitting his peak in his mid-20s. Like, he's 30 years old. His numbers at domestic cricket suggest a good player and nothing really more. I'm intrigued that he is the flavour of the month, and someone like Martin Guptill, who New Zealand know can win them games. He's won them games in T20s. He won them a hell of a lot of games in ODIs. Is there something kind of bubbling below the surface that we don't really know about, where they've just kind of said, okay, we can't come out and say that we're not going to pick these guys because we'll look silly when we really desperately need Trent Bolt for the World Cup, but we're not going to pick these guys. Do you think there might be something like that happening?
I think it's yes, it does feel like that. It feels, as you say, it doesn't feel like it's a personal thing, like it's not an anti-Guptill thing or necessarily, an anti-Munro thing or pick whoever you want out of those guys. It's just a philosophical decision, maybe a slippery slope-based decision. But as you say, weirdly, keeping the door open to do it when it suits New Zealand cricket, it feels untenable. It doesn't feel sustainable to me.
It feels like something where you actually need a policy, right?
Yeah, and you got to stick to it.
And it'll be a bloody hard policy to draw up. There's a lot of fishhooks around kind of this availability, and New Zealand prides itself on having this very flexible kind of contract system that allows players to jump to the IPL. Then suddenly you've put this rigid set of rules in. Maybe playing cricket in New Zealand's not as attractive as it was 6 months ago.
And it's going to get harder and harder and harder. I mean, if we look over the ditch to what they've just announced in Australia, I mean, they're paying, I can't remember, Pat Cummins, 3 million Australian or something like that as part of their central contract. So they are directly competing with those IPL numbers, but still falling short of what those guys could earn in those tournaments. We're miles below that. We're absolutely miles below that. And there's been a bit of speculation in the Australian media that the IPL teams are already starting to look at building those 12-month contracts with windows for international cricket, but basically going around the major competitions where they have some of the franchises have franchises across India, in the Caribbean, in the UAE, and now in the United States. And that becomes pretty much football-esque setups.
Yeah, well, look, I was talking to one of the coaches of one of those Indian, not a head coach, but he's part of the coaching staff for one of the IPL franchises. And he said he'd been in communication with his bosses, and they were basically saying, we'd like you to do South Africa. You can have UAE off, obviously, because they're competing times, but we'd like you to do South Africa. We haven't made a decision on Caribbean yet, but obviously also IPL. So this is the environment we're going to be faced with now. Hey, another little talking point I was quite interested in, and again, I know we're talking about small plate share size samples here, but 3 newcomers kind of this summer, extending into the autumn, Chad Bowes, Ben Lister, Henry Shipley. Thoughts on how they've entered the international game, I guess? Yeah, look, it's hard to say they've set the world on fire. I mean, Bowes, we've mentioned, 8 games, 94 runs, a high score of 31. It's hard to get too excited about that, particularly as a Finn Allen fan. I've got high standards on what gets me excited on this front. And then, Lister, 7 matches, 7 wickets at a run rate of 9, and Shipley, 8 matches, 13 wickets. I didn't check his run rate. Yeah, they seem fine. I think you kind of said it before, they feel like good domestic players, and it feels like it's a real stretch for them to be kind of dominant in the international arena unless conditions are massively in their favour. And, I think it's maybe just that return to the mean that we've talked about before. We've been blessed with a class, and I mean a class full of international cricket rock stars from a New Zealand point of view over the past few years, and it's going to be really bloody hard to replace them. And I think when we're blooding guys like this is when we start to see that come to life. Yeah, I agree. In fact, that's a really good way of putting it. The term I like to use is, do any of them look better than depth pieces? And I'm not sure they do yet. Henry Shipley, maybe. But again, the times that he's looked really handy have been in pretty friendly conditions for a bowler. But he's got some natural advantages with height. Probably not quite as quick as you'd like, but he could do a little bit. Lister, I know, poor Jason Hoyte's not with us, so I feel terrible that we're going to mention Lister without allowing him to rattle on for 5 minutes about what a wonderful player he is. But he looks like he's got a little bit about him, but I'm not sure that he's ever going to become, as you mentioned, a rock star of international cricket. One guy who's been around the scene for a long time and has never kind of quite nailed down anything, Mark Chapman. Kane Williamson, we obviously know is probably not going to play a role in the World Cup. We talk about Will Young as a replacement potential for Kane Williamson, maybe Henry Nicholls in that slot. I've been really impressed with Chapman, actually. It's not a limited amount of sites, but, for a long time I doubted whether he had that class to score runs against good attacks. I'm starting to think now that he may be figuring it out.
Yeah, I mean, he's got all the cliches around him as a left-hander, doesn't he? That he's a stylish batsman. He's a gun fielder. He's got the left-arm spin if we need that for a few overs here and there. So, he's always had that ability, I guess, to bring more than one thing to the party. And he's been waiting in the wings, for such a long time behind the likes of, behind specifically Ross Taylor and Kane Williamson, and then bloody Devon Conway came out of the shadows, I guess, out of the shadows of South Africa and surpassed him. And rightly so. I'm not suggesting that was wrong by any means, but, he's really bided his time. Obviously, his stats, it's interesting when you look at his stats, like the Hong Kong numbers tend to embellish, and then he's been picked for those types of games, against the likes of Scotland and scored big runs. But I agree with you, Dylan. I think he's showed a lot of, not potential, not that word, but kind of the ability to hang around or the ability to step up the scoring rate. He's showed an ability to be quite flexible and bring, I guess, have multiple gears, be creative, be inventive, and still look really good. So particularly for a guy from King's College, I mean, it's hard. He's got a higher bar to pass for me, I think, on that front. I think it's going to be tricky, though, because I think, potentially, I guess if we're talking about prepping for the one day, for the World Cup later this year, where does he sit if we're going to get? So, we could move Conway down and just put someone into Blaze to open, and then, potentially we solve that problem with the likes of, Mitchell and Nicholls. Yeah, potentially, and Latham, of course, is in there. And then, as you mentioned, Young, I think you and I are on the same page on this. It's like we're just waiting for him to grasp those opportunities. But, it feels like Chapman's probably the next cab off the rank on that front.
And I was really surprised when you read out that Will Young has got a strike rate of 99 in T20s, because you watch him bat for CD in the Super Smash, and he is, he's amazing. He hits the ball out of the ground, and he just looks a slightly different player when he gets into that New Zealand setup. And that, I think, it's quite a big call, but you almost feel like you can see a bit of fear there, a fear of failure, which other players don't really have because they've been giving long, extended runs, whereas he knows that he doesn't have long, extended runs. He's got to make it happen, and it has to happen now. And he scored runs against the Netherlands, and he scored runs. He scored that not out towards the end of the one-day series in the home summer against Sri Lanka. But we need a signature Will Young innings against a good team, and it needs to happen pretty quickly, I think. Yeah.
Well, I think, if you're comparing, say, Young and Allen, which seems a bit of a ridiculous comparison, but if we're talking about, openers or getting blooded into the team, it does feel like Finn Allen did what he was doing on the domestic scene and then brought into the international team, and they just said, keep doing that. Don't change. We're not going to pick you to be anything other than what we've seen you be really good at. And Young hasn't had the luxury of having to do that. He's had to sort of mould to fit the circumstances. And I know we've talked about that extensively on here, but it does feel like that's a thing. And to your point, his domestic strike rate, Will Young, that is 134 in T20s, and this year it was 165. So, he is stepping it up, but it's not flowing through into that international arena yet.
Taking a step back from the international arena, let's talk about the New Zealanders in the IPL. I don't think we can underestimate how important it is to have a few New Zealanders doing well in the IPL. And the reason I say that is there's 9 New Zealanders at the IPL this season. There are so many Australians over there, and not even household name Australians. We talk about how we can't, how New Zealand cricket can't afford to pay their best players the same amount as the Englands, the Indias, and Australia, obviously. The IPL is the way to get our rock stars what they deserve to be paid. So it's really important they do well. I'll just run through some numbers here. Conway and Santner at Chennai. Conway's played 5 games, 181 runs. at a strike rate of near 150. The strike rates are really high in the IPL this season, by the way. He's 11th on the aggregates. I think you have to say he's doing bloody well.
Absolutely, and yeah, he got 80-odd off 40-odd balls the other day at Chinnaswamy, which to be fair is a village-sized ground. And I saw him talking after that game and saying, 200's par in terms of a team total, so 10 runs and over. I think there were 33 sixes or something ridiculous in that game. He got one of the big stupid checks at the end and was referred to as being explosive and ominous and all that kind of stuff. But in one of the interviews, he said that their top order were aiming to have a strike rate, we were talking about that earlier, of 200. That's wow. That's the new standard for those top order batters in the IPL. So, they are literally operating at another level.
Chennai's got another New Zealander, Mitchell Santner. He's only had 3 games, only taken 3 wickets, but that economy rate of 6.75 is pretty bloody handy. You'd also give him a tick and say when he's been asked to do something, he's done it pretty well.
Yeah, I think he's pretty well regarded over there. I mean, I think he's competing with the likes of Mo and Ali to get in that team, which is, that's not a pretty difficult. And they've got Theekshana, the mystery spinner from Sri Lanka, and then they don't have a particularly strong fast bowling attack apparently, and so they've got this big unit, Sasunda Magala, the South African, who's about 150 kgs. And failed the 2-kilometre time trial famously in South African cricket, which they love to do. He said in fitness in South Africa is only about running in terms of cricket teams, which didn't really work for him. So my point being, these are the guys that Santner has to keep out. And I think it'll be a horses for courses thing, where there's a bit of turn or they really decide that they don't need that South African pace bowling. I think we'll see him popping in and out of that team. I don't think he's been dropped because he's sort of let anybody down. I think he's regarded as a bit of a gun.
And Moeen Ali has taken a lot of wickets, but his economy rate is much higher than Santner's. So, he'll get some more games, I'm sure. News gets a little bleaker from here on in. Kane Williamson, Gujarat, 1 game, total disaster. Total and utter disaster.
Just an absolute debacle. Totally. Yeah, I just feel so sorry for him, and I feel sorry for the New Zealand team, and I feel sorry for all New Zealand cricket fans. I mean, it's just such a shame. I mean, this was probably going to be a swan song tournament for him in October, and just an absolute shame. The only people that are going to be excited about that are all of the millions of Dason Shanaka fans, of course, who replaced Kane Williamson in that IPL team. Yeah, what a absolute debacle. Poor bugger.
Waiting. Moving to Kolkata, 2 New Zealand quicks here. Tim Southey, Lockie Ferguson. Lockie's played 3 games, taken 1 wicket, economy rate an eye-popping 12.5, and it's even worse for poor old Tim. 2 games, 2 wickets, economy rate of 13.16. Look, you've got to put some context where some pace bowlers bowling at the death in an IPL where the scoring is really high. They're going to get punished, but you can't look at that and say, oh, yeah, it's going well.
No, I think that's fair. It's the IPL's a batting exhibition with a bit of luck, and you need a lot of luck as a bowler, I think. Obviously ability, but definitely luck. I mean, they are playing on some absolute roads.
Yep. Trent Boulter, Rajasthan, 4 games, 6 wickets, economy rate of 8.37. He's the best of the Rajasthan seamers, so he's doing pretty well, as you know he's going to. I mean, he's class above as a T20 opening bowler. Yeah,
yes, and I agree. And there's a classic moment. We were talking about Devon Threway before, and Trent Boult was involved in an amazing 4-way the other night. I don't know if you saw that. Yeah. Top edge off his bowling. 3 fielders sort of accumulate in the middle of the pitch. Mass collision. The ball pops up, I think, off the wicket-keeper's glove, and who should catch it but the bloke standing 3 metres away, which was the lovely Trent Boult for a very strange caught and bowled.
I did love it how he got a real he got talked up about that, how, what an amazing cricketer, anticipating that it could be an issue and being in the right place. I mean, that is just pure
totally. Yeah. I loved it as well. He looked really pissed off initially, and then realised that it had all worked out okay, and then he started laughing. It was you could see it. You could see him going through the emotions.
We've also got 2 New Zealanders at the Royal Challengers of Bangalore. Michael Bracewell's played 2 games. He's had 1 bat for 19 runs. Not particularly quick runs, actually, and 2 wickets at 10 and over. Yeah, look, first probably, well, actually, is it his first IPL?
Yeah.
I think it is,
pretty
isn't
sure.
it? Yeah. So, I mean, that's all right. He's probably going to scratch around for games from here on in. Finn Allen hasn't had a game at all yet.
No, you just feel like Finn Allen is put into the nets to just pump the bowlers and give them a taste of what they can expect when they head out into the middle. But I actually haven't looked at who's ahead of him in the queue at RCB. But
well, there's a big top three there, isn't there? I mean, Faf and Virat. It's pretty tough to break in there, you would have thought. And Glenn Phillips is also finding it pretty tough to break in at the Sunrisers of Hyderabad. Played one game, 8 runs. Got the 8 runs reasonably quickly, but that's the thing that's really difficult for these guys that are fringe players who are competing for places. They're going to get limited opportunities. You've really got to make it count when it does. And look, some of these players have to come home with a wet sail, I think, if New Zealand want to get more players for the 2024 edition. Yeah,
it'd be interesting to see how it flows through. I don't know, we said the same about the women's IPL and how it's the shop window for New Zealand cricket and New Zealand cricketers, and I guess you mentioned it earlier on. Yeah, someone like Phillips is interesting because he's become quite a mercurial batsman. He's obviously a terrific fielder, but you do get the sense that and I know he's sort of trying to be a bowler, but it feels like, he's really trying to force his way into that team as a batter, and it's just really, really difficult to be a top order batter in that tournament.
Yeah. Hey, we've got New Zealanders playing elsewhere as well. We've got 4 New Zealanders. It's slightly tenuous. 4 New Zealanders in county cricket at the moment. We've got Colin de Grandhomme and Will Williams, in Lancashire. I think Will Williams has had to disavow New Zealand, denounce New Zealand as a country to be able to play in county cricket. But Colin de Grandhomme certainly playing as an overseas player. He's actually started pretty well, CDG.
Yeah, I haven't seen too many of his stats, but I did see a headline or like maybe it was a caption which talked about him unsheathing the long handle, which I thought sounded quite promising. Gosh, I must say, every time I see his name, I do think, God, he'd be great to have back in that Test team. I mean, he's really left a cavernous hole with the injury to Jamieson, I think. And maybe the falling away of Jamieson's batting, let's put it that way as well. Doug Bracewell, I mean, I guess is he over there filling in basically for Jimmy Anderson when he heads off to the Ashes for Essex? I think that's probably the theory there. I know he's playing now, and I think
Doug Bracewell's in Essex. Around. He wouldn't be filling in for Jimmy Anderson, though, who was a Lancashire boy.
Oh, okay. Pardon my ignorance. Yep, fair call.
But yeah, he's definitely in Essex. He's taken a few wickets, 4 wickets. He's only played one game, took 2 in each innings. And the other New Zealander, and it's a what-if story for me, actually, is Matt Quinn, who was a New Zealand under-19 player. He's been playing in the UK for years now. Again, not as an overseas player. He's obviously got a passport. But he's had a good start for his new county, Kent. He was at Essex for years and years, I think. He's at Kent now. He's taken 6 wickets at about 20. Has a few injuries here and there, Matt Quinn, but overall he's got a pretty good county record, actually. And he's one of those guys that, I mean, it's not that New Zealand are particularly short on right-arm, fast-medium bowlers, but a bit of a what-if story. Anyway, and...
Yeah, pretty badly timed coming through the ranks 10 years ago too, when we had particularly strong stocks. I think I saw he was at the Under-19 World Cup in 2012, so, he's been kind of... Yeah, it's just an ill-timed run in terms of pace bowling. He does look like Lord Flashbeard. I saw the Kent Cricket Club website described him as. Quite a filthy mo, quite a wild mane. And obviously quite a character, quite a beloved guy, I think. People will, I think they like being around him, and he's an absolute legend at Essex. There was a famous end to a game over there where he got absolutely bounced to death by Morne Morkel.
Yes.
Jay Durnbach shoulder charged him, and he still hung about. Essex they won by 1 wicket. It was him and Ryan Ten-Descartes.
Yes.
Extraordinary.
Hey, obviously we're shy of Jason Hoyte today, so we're going to abandon the furniture like News or Ruse and the obscurity and go straight onto your correspondence.
Waiting! Toppa Correspondence of the Week, brought to you by Leader NZ's Lasagna Toppa.
I got some correspondence here from Simo, and he says, "Hi guys, something to discuss. Finn Allen and Paul Ford, the only folk in the wider New Zealand cricket fraternity to only ever be referred to by both their names. It's never Finn or Paul, nor Allen or Ford, but always both." And it's a very good point. I think we might have mentioned it on a couple of occasions with Finn Allen, whose name is actually Finley Hugh Allen. But I'm wondering, Paul, around the home, Trace, is it dinner's ready, Paul Ford, or
it does get rolled out quite a bit. Yeah, Paul Stewart Ford often in Radio Hodaki circles as well. So one of those names that's so short that the nickname becomes an extension rather than a what's the word?
Contraction.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, look, I first of all, I love being mentioned in a sentence with Finn Allen as being part of the wider cricket fraternity. That's a very, very what's that called? Like a broad family? No, what's that called? Like a broad
church.
Yeah, it's a very broad church for myself and Finn Allen to be in. But I do think we are joined by some others. I had a quick thing, like Aaron Lau, I think is one that comes to mind. Yeah, always used as a double banger. I think Murphy Sewer, which is probably a longer one, but I don't think very much. We don't really talk about Sewer, which obviously has other ramifications. And then the short ones, Tim May, Brett Lee, those types of names. So look, we're reasonably uncommon, but I wouldn't say that we're unique. And we're so similar in so many other ways, of course, Finn Allen and myself.
I think Brett Lee might have started at the same time as brother Shane Lee too. It was never Lee either. It was always Shane Lee.
Or the fat one. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I've got a piece of correspondence too from a fellow by the name of Josh B, and this is around BCCI shenanigans. Hi gents, long time listener, first time emailer, and also Paul Ford, next door neighbour in Karori. Yeah. Oh, g'day Josh, that's lovely, sensational. I look forward to saying g'day to you out putting the bins out or whatever. Great podcast, and always look forward to a Jason Hoyte rant being part of each episode. Josh, sorry, you'll have to wait for next week on that one. I wanted to bring to your attention, Josh writes, the developing debacle re the scheduling of this year's Cricket World Cup. Here we are, 6 months out from the event, and we still have no idea about the schedule, where the teams will be playing. And then, of course, he says, lucky India is a small country, so really easy to get around. Can you imagine another global event in world sport where this would be allowed to happen? How the hell are fans expected to plan a trip to the event, as I and a group of friends would like to do, with this level of organisation? The reasons given by Cricinfo are vagaries of the monsoon season, an annual event in a country with thousands of years of recorded history. 2, visas for the Pakistan team, that is fully within India's control. And 3, a tax exemption for the event. As ever, this shows the disdain that the BCCI and its henchmen in the Indian government have for the rest of world cricket. But of course, we haven't got any leverage. We just have to suck it up. Maybe they don't want the fans to come. Cheers, Josh. And he did finish with a nice shout out to the Karori Junior Cricket Club, who do a magnificent job here in my neck of the woods. But anyway, DC, what do you think about this? I mean, it does seem like an absolute shambles.
Well, it is actually true, because I went online, it wouldn't have been more than a fortnight ago, to try to find some information just for a piece I was writing, actually, about where New Zealand might be playing their pool games and that. And shit, it was hard to find anything. It was absolutely ridiculous. And he said something there like, would it happen in any other global event, major world sport event? And the simple fact is it wouldn't. It actually wouldn't happen. I don't know how it's allowed to get to this point. I haven't actually been keeping my eye on it, so I'm coming into this pretty fresh. But like I said, I did have a look a couple of weeks ago and was gobsmacked by how little information I could find.
And I think in this, I don't want to put you in an awkward position, Dylan, but the other thing is that this is also one of those things that's a bit like kryptonite for so many people, because not many players, not many commentators, and I'm not saying journalists, but lots of people that are connected to that broader church of cricket, to use that term again. This is a difficult thing to talk about because you have to slag off the BCCI. We're unencumbered here, but it doesn't seem to be one of those things that many people are going to dig in on.
Correct.
If you've got correspondence for us, do flick us an email, byc@beigebrigade.co.nz, or slide into the DMs of the Alternative Commentary Collective or the Beige Brigade on Instagram or Facebook. Sometimes we take a while to get through to the correspondence because we crap on so much talking about other things, but we do definitely always read it, and we'll pretty much every time we'll try and talk about it on the show. So, thanks for dropping us a line, Simo and Josh B. Sensational. Hey, Dylan, I had one last thing that I wanted to talk about very quickly, which was just a shout out to Tommy Teabag Blundell and Daryl Mitchell for being named the Wisdens among the 5 Wisden Cricketers of the Year. Yep. Absolutely sensational. So it was those 2, Ben Folkes, Matthew Potts, and the Indian women's captain Harmanpreet Kaur, 5 Cricketers of the Year. I mean, those 2 had an absolutely magnificent and massive impact in a losing cause in that English cricketing summer last year.
Yeah, and look, we've banged on about Daryl Mitchell for a long time now because he's just been incredible what he's done since he's come into that New Zealand team across formats. But sometimes Tom Blundell gets overlooked a little bit. But the highest praise that I can give Tom Blundell, because I think he's just a fantastic player, is I really think about BJ Watling anymore. And BJ Watling was one of my favourite cricketers. And I loved everything about the way he went about the game. But Blundell's elevation into that Test team in particular has been so seamless that, one of my favourite cricketers who retired 2021 is gone. Raised him from my mind. Sorry, BJ. But it's true.
Brutal. High praise indeed. And hopefully there's some high praise for this podcast in the reviews on the of the BYC podcast. We love turning up each week and doing this, or most weeks when we're not at Waiheke Island or wherever Jace is this week. I'll give you one last thing to think about before we go, and this is one of the differences between Pakistan and New Zealand. All hospitals in Islamabad have been put on high alert because the New Zealand cricket team is in town. 3 teams of doctors are kept at the ready on hold in the hospitals to ensure that any medical emergency for the team is dealt with swiftly and effectively. They have to provide 2 ambulances, and they will also have an extra 2 ambulances which will follow the transportation of the teams to and from the stadium, and no buses will be available for locals to use during that time. I mean, things are operating on a different level in Pakistan, and I feel, wouldn't that just make you feel incredibly safe, Dylan?
I'm not sure if it's reassuring or the exact opposite. But it's not a bad way to go out.
Thanks, everybody. We'll catch up with you next week.